What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Losing Grit podcast. I am Jeremy, that is Joe, and we're here to talk a little bit about Martinsville, one of the greatest races that used to be, not so much as of late. We got quite a bit to talk about, but first of all, Joe, how was your weekend?
My weekend went fantastic. We got to go out and experience some spring activities in the state of Texas, which is always fun. I enjoy that. So I didn't get to really watch the race on Sunday. Saw some Saturday action. A little bit of rain was in the forecast over the weekend, but I enjoyed the sunny weather here in Texas.
Yeah, it was a great weekend here. I made the sacrifice and did watch, I think, all the races, even watched some of the Indy race at Long Beach, which was actually really, really good race. It sucked that it was on at the same time as NASCAR. I was definitely flipping back and forth, so a few of the details have slipped through, but for the most part, I really enjoyed that race. The Martinsville race, on the other hand, a little bit less so. I would say the new package has provided a better racing compared to the spring race last year. But I think we still got quite a ways to go, because I think yet again the trucks and Xfinity series, even though John Hunter kind of stunk up the Xfinity show, I think that it was a little bit better racing, a better racing product than what the Cup series put on. And it's just a shame, because Martinsville used to be one of the best races all year. You know, that obviously Daytona is always up there, and then Bristol. I will say I think that this race made me, which I was already somewhat of a fan of, but it made me enjoy the Bristol dirt race more, because I thought we got to see a little bit more racing happen on the track, where we didn't necessarily get to see that as much as what we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, and I didn't get to watch the Sunday action like I mentioned, but the races before the trucks and the Xfinity, they were both entertaining, and unfortunately, the truck one got cut short. I was hoping that we'd see a little bit more.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on So if you didn't see the truck race, it got delayed due to some storms on Friday, which was unfortunate. But because NASCAR's been testing the wet weather tires, not rain tires, wet weather, they decided to put them on the trucks, and they started the race with those tires on. First time outside of a road course, first time on an oval this has ever happened in NASCAR. So that was honestly really awesome. And kind of looking back at how the racing was, it was great while they had them on. The only thing that NASCAR, I think, kind of messed up is they could have started the race maybe another 15, 20 minutes sooner, which would have provided probably even more entertaining of race, because they probably would have pitted and then still kept the wets on for another stint. But I know you were about to say the race was cut short because of rain. But what are your thoughts on that whole package?
I was really hoping that they would allow them to get back to racing, and even if it went into the night, it was still captivating. I was wanting to see how everything played out. Unfortunately, the race was called. Corey Heim got himself another win. Dude's performing really well. One of the top.
Was that his first win?
No, not. I don't think so.
In the truck series, I thought it was. But anyway, sorry, continue.
But the dude's one of the top prospects that you've got to watch coming up through the ranks in the NASCAR series. He's driving over there and getting really, really acclimated to his surroundings whenever he is in a vehicle, because he's not full time anywhere. It doesn't seem like these days. He's kind of being able to bounce around. So at that point, whenever you're able to win, even if it's rain shortened, still gets you in the winner's circle. At that point, all that matters is that your name's on the trophy. You're continuing to move on down the road. Then Saturday, Saturday night after John Hunter burned it down. He literally burned it down. He's sticking around there, so it was good to see him get that win. So to me, there was a lot of action that happened even before the Sunday race took place. So I enjoyed the Xfinity and Trucks series, just being able to watch those over the weekend. To me, it's a whole weekend experience, and not getting to see Sunday didn't really bum me out. It didn't sound like I missed too much. Obviously, Denny Hamlin wasn't in Victory Circle because he was putting out a podcast pretty early this morning, so they got that recorded last night. was able to listen to that, get caught up a little bit on what was going on during the race. And yeah, it seemed like the package was certainly lacking, and that's something that we were going to watch throughout the season, see how it played out. And right now, it doesn't sound like the drivers are a big fan of it. Heard several interviews saying that they couldn't pass, and that's a big problem. And I want to be entertained because, like you said, Martinsville's a great place to watch racing at traditionally, and it's not putting on the best of races. Last year's fall race was memorable in many circumstances because of how everything kind of played out with the Ross Chastain situation and the Hail Melon.
That was one of my favorite moments in NASCAR history, as far as at least last 5 to 10 years. I mean, that was epic. But Fox was running it to death there in the race. It was making me starting to go, okay, we get it. Mostly because you really lose. You just see a car up against the wall. It's was he wrecking or what is he doing? You almost really need to go back and kind of understand the situation if you had never really seen that, because just that little clip that they were showing was just kind of okay, yeah, I guess that's cool, but there's so much more meaning behind that. I mean, he was out of the championship 4. That locked him in. I mean, he was hustling hard, super hard the few laps prior to that. That was just his Hail Mary play there. So Fox obviously just had to keep showing it. But I real quick, I do want to mention that you're right, that was Corey Haim's 3rd win. He won 2 races last year. He won at Atlanta and Gateway for Kyle Busch Motorsports.
Yeah, I've been following him for a little bit, so it's cool to get to see him continue to rise through the ranks. Hopefully he gets a ride fairly soon in the Xfinity ride and gets the opportunity to show some of his skills, because he's a solid driver. Kyle Busch is no slouch himself. He was in that race too the other night, and he didn't come out ahead of everybody. But getting back to the Sunday action and how things played out, it looked like Ford, from what I was looking at in regards to data and everything, really had a really strong setup. Came out of the gate strong with Ryan Preece dominating. It looked like Kevin Harvick took home a stage win. Then we had Briscoe. All those 3 cars from the Ford camp being out of Stewart-Haas. It was nice to see some other team kind of compete against Hendrick, but then at the end of the day, guess who won? Hendrick, Kyle Larson. So to me, it's kind of concerning that Hendrick continues to win all these races and these other teams find themselves continuing to fall short at the end of the day over and over and over, and it kind of is getting a little bit concerning because Gibbs is putting up a fight but aren't consistent with their top drivers pulling in consistent strong finishes. Stewart-Haas Racing's kind of all over the place. One week they'll be really strong, one week they're at the back of the pack. Then Penske has been fairly hit or miss as well, very inconsistent. Now Hendrick's just continuing to run away with it, even with the penalties, seems like, and the lack of Chase Elliott being around for 6 weeks. It still doesn't seem like it's that long of a shot for all 4 of them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it really just came down, though, to really an untimely caution for some of these guys. It really mixed things up. Chase Elliott had a top 10 finish, but he was nowhere near. I mean, he was not even really a top 20 car, maybe a 20th place car. Logano, with his 2nd place finish, he was running 25th most of the day. And Truex was, I think, a lap down 2 different times. He got back there initially because of a pit road issue. I think it was speeding. I might be wrong on that one. But he was in the back. Once he was in the back, he couldn't do anything. And then he was kind of fortunate because he was one of the few who had waited to make their green flag pit stops or whatever. It wasn't that, but just they were off cycle, and then the caution comes out, and it just jumbled everything up. So when you look at the results, it kind of shows you how the day was, but it really doesn't, because Ryan Preece was looking good. He had a speeding penalty, so he was in the back, couldn't really make it up until late. Like I said, Truex, he got back up there, and man, I mean, I'm kind of curious if this race was 500 laps like it normally is compared to the reduced 400. I don't know if Larson still wins. Obviously, things would have strategy would have been a little bit differently, so you can't just say this or that. But Truex was kind of running them down late. He was on fresher tires. It's just, listening to the drivers and teams, it just sounds like there's just too much grip on these short tracks. And then you add in the fact that these guys are able to shift because they got five gears versus 4 last year. It's just making it to where you can stay out on older tires and you can maintain. I mean, Logano did that. Larson, I think with 2 tires, he did that. It's just they've got to figure that out. And, when you add width to a tire, that's going to provide more grip. So for me, this race was an okay race, but it just, when you look at the results, it doesn't really show you the teams that were strong, because Larson really wasn't that strong most of the day. If that race plays out like it normally does, Hendrick, they might have 4 cars outside the top 10. I mean, it is impressive. You're right. Like you're saying, like, it's impressive that they keep finding ways to win, even if they don't have the best cars. But I don't really know what you do if you're another team when you have clearly a better car throughout the day and then you still lose to these guys.
And that's the one thing about NASCAR, and one thing about not watching this race and looking – I'll go back and watch it, but looking at it now, just the data and the perspective is, hey, everything you just said has a valid point, but at the end of the day, this is NASCAR. Strategy is a big part of it, making the right call at the right time. Sure, some things happen that are out of the ordinary, and there's a caution at the worst time possible for you and your team, and you've had a great day. But that plays out through an entire season, as long as you're continually finding your spot or finding yourself in the right spot at the right time. You don't always have to benefit from every situation, but over the long term, if you're winning more times than you're losing, hopefully you've got a good set stint in the playoffs. And so some drivers continue to find better opportunities to take advantage of that. A guy that seems to continue to find a way to shoot himself in the foot, unfortunately, is Denny Hamlin. And he's getting into this position over and over and over where they'll have good runs, and then something happens with him, either getting a speeding penalty, something on pit road. And we're looking at several drivers that are very experienced kind of running into that several times this year. Not just him, but we've seen Martin Truex, we've seen Kyle Busch, we've seen Ryan Blaney. All these guys continue to have these problems. And then guys out of the ordinary that are continuing to have strong runs week in and week out, like a Ricky Stenhouse, and we saw Michael McDowell, these guys that have pretty strong, consistent finishes. Alex Bowman, the guy continues to find a way to get it done without really having a big accident on the track or in pit road, or just being able to manage races. And I think this new car and the new way of kind of applying the advantages that you talked about with shifting and stuff that come up to a driver, some of these guys that have had lower equipment or lower tier equipment now have equal to or greater than equipment in some cases, because look at Eric Jones and Legacy Motorsports. Those guys haven't been very consistent at all, but he's a good driver. So the car hasn't been a huge factor in years past, has been a huge factor in years past. Now a lot of guys have a little bit more equal equipment, and we're seeing some of the guys take advantage of that, I think, and play with some of the strategy to get some better finishes at the end of the day. So it is a little bit weird racing, and things are changing within the sport. Is it here to stay, or are they going to kind of adapt to allow for some of these guys that have not really been performing too well maybe to find an advantage at the end? I don't know how it all plays out, but it's certainly different.
I think the cars being equal is a good thing. You don't want on, equal settings with, fresh tires, everyone, essentially all setups are the same. You don't want just, a couple cars that just seem to have like an extra 50 horsepower or something like that.
Yeah, because that's what this next-gen car was supposed to do, is kind of level the playing field, bring everything together for everyone to kind of have the same parts package, put it together, meet within the specs, so everybody has that equipment on Sunday that is very, very equal. There's nobody doing a lot of the extra engineering to hone in on the aero a little bit more, hone in on the engine parts. But yeah, go on.
Well, what I was going to get to is it's great that the cars are equal, but the problem is they stay equal for too long. So it doesn't matter how good of a driver is. or how much better skilled he is, he can't do anything throughout the race to give him that advantage, because that guy in front is able to shift if he, downshift, to help him, get into the corner better. And if he washes up, well, he just downshifts, grabs that gear, and then goes. And then you, who maybe were hitting the corner perfect, you can't really take advantage of it because he's able to correct for his errors. And the problem we're seeing, we've kind of gotten some conflicting reasonings why the NASCAR has lowered the horsepower down so much. Seems like that's maybe what the manufacturers want, but we're not quite sure, because we know that some of these manufacturers are already putting out cars that come with as much horsepower as these, so they're more than capable of providing an engine that does that. But you got to take away something. You either got to give them more horsepower, or you got to take away grip, and not just grip in the sense of downforce, because that's going to be kind of constant throughout. It's got to be through the tires to wear out. So in the olden days, maybe you were like, hey, I'm going to play the short run strategy. So when we start or restart from, on this green flag drop, I'm going to just send it. I'm going for it. And then I think there'll be a caution by the time my tires fall off enough where everyone starts catching me. But another driver might feel like, no, we're going to play the long strategy. We're going to conserve our tires, because by the end of the run to the next pit cycle or end of the stage or whatever, they're going to have better grip and they're going to be able to perform better lap times. But if you're not getting that, then there's just basically 35 cars that are just out there like moving chicanes, but you can't actually move around them because they're going the same speed you are. So it's nice that the teams are on a level playing field in that regard, but when they're so close together in lap times, you can't pass anybody. So it's like they have to figure that out, and taking away more downforce, I don't think that that's necessarily going to fix the problem. They got to take away the overall grip. And we kind of saw it in the truck race, with those wet weather tires. Like, those wore out. They held up nice, but you were able to kind of see some guys start making some passes that we didn't quite see when they had the slicks on. And so it's like, if they can kind of take that, it made me think of actually when they were showing that on TV and just some of the comments from, Hamlin and some of the other drivers. It made me think about one of the early Denny Hamlin episodes where he was talking about putting groove tires on there instead of just being just flats, actual slicks, putting grooves in there. I think F1 did that for a while. I'm sure that's not what the tire manufacturer Goodyear wants to do, and the teams would like to not do that, but that might be potentially the easiest fix, because they're already talking to, guys in the team saying, hey, look, if they said we could have more horsepower, how quickly could we get this done? Get this done. And they're saying it's not even until next year before they could realistically have everything in place to start doing it. So NASCAR would have to make the call right now to have a better spring Martinsville if they were going to go the higher horsepower route. And that's not fun to hear as a fan, because this race used to be so good, and it was still okay. It was better than the spring race last year. The higher temperatures, it was like in the 70s. That certainly helped versus I think it was in the 40s or maybe low 50s in the last race, and it was in the day versus the night. So it was better, but it's just one of those trends we kind of been seeing throughout the year, even on different tracks. It's like these guys need to have to be able to play a different strategy within the race, how they race the cars, not just when they want to pit and things like that.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate with this new package that NASCAR brought to the short tracks and the road courses that it didn't really help the racing product in a short track environment at Martinsville. So hopefully they find some tweaks and can bring us back a better package by this time next year. It sounds like there are avenues to get there. But
so what is NASCAR going to allow the teams to do?
There's so many unanswered questions in the near future with NASCAR and how they're going to approach some of this stuff. And it's been something that I think lingers over all of us because we cover this and we've covered it for several years now. And now that it's one of those things that we're continuing to see, hey, how is this going to progress? We've got a whole new market deal coming on the television horizon. How does that play into their decisions on how they go about marketing? There's a lot of things on the horizon that will play out, and if we can get better racing at some of these tracks that historically have been one of the best places to watch a race, Martinsville always has been captivating. If we can bring back some of the things that people like to see, some of the rivalries and things that make NASCAR.
Well, and thing is this car, the next gen car, has made mile and a half better because they were getting pretty bad with the last gen, which was unfortunate. But it's awesome. Like the mile and a halves, the 2 miles tracks when we go there, like those have been better racing. Road course racing, I think, has improved. I didn't think it was that bad before. I think the cars were a lot harder to drive, so it still made for some good racing. Now, with the cars being more equal, better braking, like I said, better grip, it allows some of the teams that had more of a disadvantage before, it does make them more competitive. So I think the road course racing, which I do like, it's still really good. I don't want them to mess that up, but the short tracks and honestly even the super speedways haven't been as exciting as even in somewhat recent past, which is just kind of a bummer because we were certainly excited about this car and it has delivered some great racing so far, but at some of the more bread and butter tracks you're kind of talking about, it's still off and it doesn't feel like we're that close to it being right.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but you mentioned super speedways. This week, Talladega is coming up, and that's one of my favorite tracks, if not my favorite track. And the racing action this week hopefully performs a little bit better, a lot more entertaining. The super speedways seem to always be entertaining. What do you think the racing environment is like this week? Do we see a lot of back and forth at the front? Do we see some guys dominate? Because we have seen at some of these super speedways where a driver will lead quite a few laps and they kind of fall in line and there isn't a lot of action on the bottom line, being able to kind of harness the draft and get by. There are obviously a lot of laps, a lot of things that we consider whenever we're taking in a super speedway, but what are your initial thoughts on how this one might play out?
Unfortunately, I'm not super high on it. I wish I was. Obviously, I'll watch, and I hope to be corrected of that. But it does feel like we're gonna see two wide racing, pretty much the whole race. Which when that's happening, any second something could go wrong, and there will be a big accident. But I'm at the point now where I don't have to see these big accidents for it to feel like a good race. I want to see guys be able to make moves, and sometimes the lines break up a little bit, so that allows a couple guys to maybe kind of snake their way through from the back to the front. I don't think we'll see that. We'll see if they're going to make any more changes to maybe help with that. I think it's going to feel like an exciting race, and I hope that delivers. But in that aspect where we see guys kind of coming and going, I don't think we'll see too much of that, which is a shame. But I would imagine there will be at least 1 to 2 big wrecks, which obviously I know most of the fans like to see. But for me, that's not necessarily always great racing. So that's kind of my viewpoint. I think it will feel exciting. I think we will see some big wrecks. I think you're right. We will see some of the guys, maybe like Brad and Chris Buescher, being up at the front and just being able to kind of manage the two lines and kind of just leading a bunch of laps. But obviously, at any point, those guys could get taken out. So if you're playing them on DraftKings, you got to be careful with that too. So I'm kind of lowering my expectations for this race in hopes that it over delivers, because when you go to a Daytona or a Talladega, my expectations are always really high because normally, just historically, we've always seen really good racing there, and you just kind of have to look at recent data to know some of that classic racing. We're not going to see Dale Earnhardt come back from 18th to first in 4 or 5 laps or whatever it was. We're not going to see that, unfortunately, this week in this race. But I think there will be some good moments, and I think the most exciting thing to kind of look forward to is, will someone like a Ricky Stenhouse, maybe a McDowell or Justin Haley or someone like that, will one of those guys be able to position themselves at the front and be able to get that win to put them in the playoffs? Because that's what this race really is delivering some of these lower drivers, the guys that don't drive for the mega teams. Will one of those guys be able to get this win and get in the playoffs? Because I got to say, that win for Ricky sure has paid off. I mean, he's been running really solid. We mentioned earlier, he was one of the few where you can kind of say, hey, he wasn't having the best of days, but he was running kind of mid-teens most of the day, and he just kind of was able to get a little bit better at the end. But there's been several races where he's been up there kind of contending, so they're really taking the most of that win from Daytona. So that's what I'm kind of hoping to see. How about yourself? What are you kind of expecting out of this race?
Yeah, that's a great platform for a lower tier driver to get a win, get into the playoffs. Ricky locked his in at the first race of the year. Looking for someone to take advantage of this situation, play their cards right. Somebody like a Bubba Wallace, somebody that has experience, has won here before. I don't know. I'm not gonna pick Bubba officially, but there's some other drivers that kind of stand out whenever you look at the data in these situations. We'll be kind of dissecting that as the week goes on, as we get into everything with putting every detail that we can into our race guide or our race projections and everything, and getting a guide together for the event on Sunday. There's a lot of stuff that's still left to play out. We got practice and qualifying and everything that goes into that. And if you want to check out any of the details and our projections for the week, check out our website, losinggripodcast.com. It's got we've got a head-to-head tool, so you can do that this week at Talladega. Might not be the best week to use that, but in the future weeks, we've got a lot of tools available over there. Check it out. There's a free sheet available every week to you, so if you want to see where we stand on a certain driver, we also give you our DK impact rating scores. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, hey, play this guy, we like him a lot, has a great advantage this week, do that. Certainly check it out, losinggripodcast.com. Jeremy, it's something that we do every week. We got to watch how the weeks play out, find where we think there's value in regards to not just DraftKings, other things that we try to take advantage of throughout the week, but doing a lot of leg work. This season's been a little bit of a up and down, a lot of things being impacted with penalties and NASCAR being, we can say, inconsistent. What are you looking for out of Talladega in regards to like the DraftKings angle? Are you approaching it from the stack the back, or are you trying to maybe do a little bit different? Because like you just kind of alluded to, there have been some instances this year alone where some of these guys get up front and lead a lot of laps.
Yeah, I got to dive into it a little bit more, but I think really it's going to come down to qualifying, and I might take a little bit of, I'll kind of assess. Actually, there's not going to be any practice. It's super speedway.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's
that's right.
It's just qualifying.
Yep.
So if there is actually qualifying and it's not set by the metric, that gives us at least a little bit, but it really doesn't tell us much. So it'll kind of come down to just which drivers are starting in which positions. I think you can certainly still play the ultra bottom guys, the guys that just they're never in contention, because if there is a couple massive wrecks, they typically avoid them because they're not even in the lead draft. So you can certainly play that angle. I'm sure I'll play some with that in some of the tournaments, but Just looking for guys just in good, decent positions, and I think you can kind of get a little bit away from the stack the back. It's still a risky play because, we know, like you mentioned, Bubba's good here. Chase Elliott's really good here. Ryan Blaney's really good here. They might still be in kind of that nice spot where they get some place differential upside, but because they're likely to be towards the front, if they happen to get taken out, it's going to kill your lineup. So the safe approach would still be just kind of stack the back, but I think I'll try to mix it up. I'll try to go with guys that I know are historically good in this style of racing, and just trying to nail guys with good finishing positions, even if they don't have a lot of PD upside. If you see someone like a Ricky Stenhouse starting 12th, hey, he's just a guy who might be able to get you a nice top 10, and that might be better than playing a J.J. Yaley or a B.J. McLeod or someone like that who's starting, way back there. But, if we don't get a big wreck, those guys definitely aren't going to be in contention at all.
Yeah.
And with it being so gridlocked, you're not going to see a lot of these real dicey moves because there's just no opening. So the chances of someone messing up are lower. So the chances of those big wrecks, I think, have kind of gone down some. I don't know. Where are you kind of landing at on this? Because, I got drivers I kind of want to play, but it ultimately, it's too early in the week to say that these guys are the ones you want to play.
Yeah, I'll certainly be watching, but I still think that you can find a great pool of drivers down at the bottom of the barrel because of typical pricing that's allocated to them by DraftKings, and then the scenarios that typically play out in these environments. I'm sure we'll see a couple wrecks that will allow for them to still take advantage of the situation. But I've got guys I've got guys I'm eyeing, like you mentioned, that are kind of in that middle of the road whenever it comes to pricing typically. And starting position, we'll probably see very similar starting positions that we've kind of got accustomed to from some of these drivers like Justin Haley, Ty Gibbs even, Noah Gragson, guys like that haven't aren't always talked about every week, but are pretty good super speedway drivers. Keep my eyes on them, kind of find out where they fall into place. You might find somebody in the same situation where they start in the 15th place position, finish in the top 10, top 5, and you make a great play with that. Them kind of being a little bit cheaper, you can do a lot of different things. So we'll keep our eye on it. Certainly check it out. You can now watch our full podcast on YouTube and Rumble, so certainly check it out. Our Rumble is Losing Grip Pod. You can head over there, check out the latest video, check out a couple of our other previous videos. That's something we'll be doing that's new. We're excited to have a different angle to bring you content on. And then also YouTube, we've been doing clips and stuff over there, really been focused on doing things a little bit different. We've got some card break videos and things like that to bring you extra content. So this is another avenue where we think that it'll be a little bit more fun to get the entire episode on video out in front of you every week. Allows you to see our setup and what we're doing, talking about a little bit more relative, and we're excited to do that. So certainly appreciate those of you that have subscribed over there on YouTube already. If you could give us a subscription thumbs up over there on Rumble, that would certainly help us out since we're new over there, and we're excited for that angle, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of exciting. Not really didn't see a whole lot of content in the NASCAR world over there, so like to kind of see maybe get some views over there, just test the waters, kind of see what's out there. I mean, they've done a lot to improve their platform, and hey, just not everyone likes YouTube, so this gives people another option and whatnot. So it's going to be exciting to kind of see what will happen with that. What are some of your thoughts about the rest of this season, though? We're 8-9 races in now, I believe. This was the 9th race. We still got quite a few races to go until the playoffs start. I think mathematically Chase Elliott is still able to point his way in, but I think that they're attacking this as a must-win. What are some of your thoughts about the rest of the season? We're gonna be going to some crazy tracks here. Chicago street course, that's gonna be completely unknown. We're kind of getting into that point now where we're hitting a couple of the big NASCAR tracks. Martinsville, Talladega, and then we'll be doing the Coke 600 here in about a month or so. That's always gonna, that's just a classic race. I mean, it's a crown jewel race. And I think that will be a pretty good one. As we mentioned, mile and a half, these cars tend to put on a pretty good race. So I'm excited for that one. But what are some of your thoughts for the rest of the season? Now that we're 9 races in, what have you liked so far? What have you kind of not liked? Where are you at? I mean, are you all over Hendrick at this point?
Yeah, there's a lot to still unfold in the season, and that's the thing about NASCAR is it's a long season. And so 9 weeks in, we're starting to get a pretty good taste of kind of how things are shaping up. Been at a variety of tracks, kind of got to see a lot of things play out already, but like you mentioned, there's still a lot of places that we get to go that we haven't been to since last year. Things have changed a little bit. Packages have changed, so situations have changed too. So like Chase Elliott coming into this past weekend at Martinsville, getting a top 10, I'm sure that felt great for him to be able to do that. Strategy might have been a big player in that, but that guy needs to be able to lock himself in at some point before we get too far in the ball game to make sure he's secure. But I'm really not too concerned about him and his situation. I think he'll get a win eventually. Guys that have made the playoffs in years past that maybe are kind of in the teetering zone of not making the playoffs and maybe falling out of contention early. There's several guys that are in that position, so hopefully they can kind of get a grasp in the next couple weeks with with the super speedway like Talladega on the schedule. Seeing some of these guys outside of the playoff mix potentially locking in a win could change everything. So I'm really excited to see how everything unfolds. Like you said, Crown Jewel's coming up here in a few weeks. We'll be talking about that, I'm sure, trying to figure out how everything will play out in that one. But this week in Talladega, I'm looking for somebody kind of outside the norm to be able to lock themselves in. Maybe somebody young, somebody that hasn't really made an impact yet gets to put their name into a new zone in the NASCAR or into the sport of NASCAR. We'll see who it is, but I'm really excited to see how all the season plays out. Like we said, it's a long season, still a lot to unfold.
Anything that's really surprised you, good or bad, about this season?
I think it's a little too early, but right now the only the surprising thing is how really they haven't really changed too much in regards to the short track package, how things have changed, the short track racing, I should say. They brought the short track package in to try to mix things up and bring a little bit more excitement, and it really hasn't shaped up. So that's been a letdown. The big thing this year, I think that's really been another kind of a letdown, is Denny Hamlin's performance and how he's not really been the Denny Hamlin of old, and hopefully he can get that righted here before too long.
Well, he's a hack, so.
Well, yeah, you can always throw that out there in regards to the Denny Hamlin situation. I've always been a big fan on the down low of him, so hopefully he can right the ship and get things going. On the other side, I think Hendrick's kind of going to ride into the sunset if things don't change. They've really got a leg up on the competition in my eyes. Been a Hendrick fan, but I'm also very unbiased whenever it comes to the state of the sport and who's performing well and who's not. And unfortunately, I think those guys, or unfortunately for the rest of the field, I think those guys have a leg up.
Yeah, I think. Looking at Martinsville performance, I'm concerned with Byron because he was actually my pick to kind of be one of the main dominators. I thought he was just gonna tear it up, and he didn't even sniff it. I mean, it was basically from the drop of the green flag, he just kind of sunk and just held out low teens most of the day, mid-teens, low teens. And outside of that race, though, I think for this year he's been pretty strong, even despite the penalties that he's that team's been given. I think Penske seems like they're off mostly. I mean, I know Logano, he got that second place finish. Blaney's been pretty solid, but he's had a few races where he just hasn't really gotten the best results. And Cindric has really pretty much been nowhere to be found this year, unfortunately. So Penske kind of surprised me. I thought that they would be up there a little bit more challenging. I don't know if it's just Hendrick has found something that's just given him just that extra little bit to make everyone else look like they're off the mark. But I think kind of the biggest surprise, honestly, has been Legacy Motor Club. Last year, before they rebranded, Petty GMS, Eric Jones he started the season really well. He had several races throughout the year where he was really, really strong, got the win at Darlington. His teammate Ty Dillon did not really have a good year, and it seems like they've started this year kind of how Ty Dillon unfortunately ended the year, because Gregson came in and he's had a few moments where it's like, he's making some headway, but I mean they're really bad. And I thought with them teaming up, Jimmy Johnson coming on board, I thought that they would be a little bit more of a contender. And it's still early; they can still get it going. They could still have some good runs, but I think they're kind of one of my biggest surprises, just because I didn't have high expectations, but I had decent expectations, and they haven't really delivered on that. And they're not. I mean, at this point, they're not going to point their way in to the playoffs. They're going to need to win, unless they just hit a hot streak for like 10 straight races. That's probably one of my biggest surprises so far. It's not really, to me personally, it's not really that surprising to see Hendrick being up at the front. We're kind of used to seeing that throughout the years. They'll have a few years where maybe they're down a little bit, but then they rebound. Didn't quite expect this much dominance, but it's going to happen from time to time. So I think it's more Penske not doing what I kind of expected at the beginning of the year, and then Legacy Motor Club would kind of be my biggest takeaways so far. But I think they're both in position where they can still have solid years.
So to wrap this thing up, I guess we got to pick up a winner. Who do you have here coming up at Talladega to win this week, Jeremy?
Well, I'll tell you, I was going to pick Todd Gilliland, but he will not be in his normal ride. This is one of the 5 scheduled races where Front Row has decided to put him in 36 and then bring Zane Smith in to run the 38. The reason why I was going to pick him is he's been running really strong. I think he was at like 4 or 5 races, top 15 before last Martinsville's race. And he was up front, like he was actually looking like the top 5, top 10 driver, and I think he lost a cylinder. And so unfortunately he finished, he was the first car 1 lap down, 24th, 25th. So that's real unfortunate for him. I think that he can still have a really good day at Talladega. But I unfortunately, I just don't feel comfortable picking him because he's not even going to have his normal crew or anything. I'm not quite sure what Front Row is doing there. I understand bringing Zane Smith in, but I don't get that move at all. But not my call. I think I'm going to have to go with Blaney.
Yeah?
Yeah, I know I just kind of talked a bunch of smack about Penske, but he's really, really stout on super speedways. If they can get him enough speed where he can get good track position to start and he's not fighting it and not in the hornet's nest, I think he's the guy that he can pull this out, and he needs it. It's been a long time since he's been to victory lane, and he has had some moments this year, but in particular last year, where he was close and it just bad luck happened, for various reasons, pit call didn't go right, strategy, caution comes out the wrong time, just whatever. He needs it. This team needs it. So I think I'm going to go with Blaney.
I like the pick. I personally would like to see him win. I think he needs it. He needs a kick in the butt to kind of get things going. My pick, I'm going to go with somebody you sound like you were pretty high on Gillen. I'm going to go with Ty Gibbs. He's also had 4 races before Martinsville with top 10s, and that's a little bit better than Gillen. Gillen's a lot more surprising being in the equipment he's in and kind of the situation. But Ty Gibbs, I think, is kind of in a position where if he wins, it wouldn't really surprise a lot of folks. But if he does, it's going to be something that's a big boost for his career. But it's going to be fun to see how this race shapes up. Anybody can win. We've seen a lot of first-time winners come at these superspeedway tracks, so maybe he gets it locked in.
All right, so Ty Gibbs. We know how these races go. This isn't like an official, but what's your backup pick? Let's just say something happens to Ty Gibbs.
Oh, man. I would have to say Denny Hamlin, maybe? Like, the dude...
Homer, okay.
The dude needs a win, man.
He does.
And we heard him say he's going to get hot here before too long. It didn't really get started at Martinsville like he thought it would, but I think he's a guy that would benefit from a win, has experience to get it, and knows all the tricks of the trade to get it done.
I mean, that's a solid pick. I mean, that's a probably better pick than your main pick, to be honest. I was thinking more long shots, but okay. I think I'm going to go with Justin Haley.
Okay, so we're going to long shots.
Yeah,
let me take a shot here. I want to go with the dinger. He's not really a long shot in the regards to odds typically at these type of races, but
he'll be back there. I would imagine he's going to be at least in the 20s, if not 30s.
And he's Haley's teammate. We'll just go with it. But
okay. So we're going colleague as our backup.
Yeah, as our backup. we'll go with those guys.
It'd be awesome to see him because those guys seem, those guys are working hard. They seem like a solid team. Much like Trackhouse, kind of coming in around the same time. Trackhouse has had a little bit more success early on, of course, but I think that they basically kind of taking over Chip Ganassi kind of gave them a leg up on Colleague. Colleague is still getting the pieces right. Hasn't been the best year for them, but there's been times. I mean, Haley was one of the few drivers who actually did kind of drive up through the field. Didn't really get the finish that he was looking for. Who knows exactly what happened. We certainly missed a lot in the race due to the coverage. Wasn't the best Martinsville coverage overall. But that's such a tough spot. I mean, you got 36, 37 cars or whatever in a half mile. You can only get so much. There's so much action happening all over. But they have had some good runs, and I still think Dinger's in a good spot to get a win at a road course and get himself into the playoffs. And I think super speedways that's Justin Haley's best spot. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dinger does it too. And we've seen it work a little bit where some two guys like RFK, Brad and Buescher, like I mentioned earlier, they were able to find each other, get their way up to the front, and once they were committed to each other, they were very hard to get around. So that could happen we've seen it in the Xfinity Series last few years with Allmendinger and Haley. They can certainly team up.
Oh, we're excited for it, and we appreciate everybody out there listening and giving us a watch as well. If you liked what you saw, certainly hit the subscribe button, give us a like and a review. That always helps. Thanks to James behind the scenes running the show. He's got the camera and the duties back there, so we certainly appreciate everything that he does for us. Until next time, I'm Joe, that's Jeremy, and we'll see you later.